And you know the teen, I was a teenager. Can you hear me?
This is the story of how a decades-old debate about hip-hop's place in music history exploded in February 2026, when Public Enemy's Chuck D delivered one of the sharpest comebacks in rock and rap history. The target was Kiss bassist Gene Simmons, who had once again declared that hip-hop doesn't belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Chuck D's response cut straight to the bone with just 5 words. Kiss is rock, but they got no roll. That zinger hit so hard because it exposed something Simmons had been missing for decades, and to understand what Chuck D meant, we need to rewind 10 years to look at a feud that asks a much bigger question about what rock and roll actually means. Chuck D noticed something about Gene Simmons a long time ago, and according to the Public Enemy frontman, the Kiss co-founder seems to say this every 3 years when it comes to rap not belonging in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. February 2026 brought another cycle, right in the middle of Black History Month, when the 76-year-old rock legend appeared on the Legends and Leaders podcast, posted February 8th, and laid out his familiar argument. Simmons told the hosts that hip-hop doesn't belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, along with opera and symphony orchestras, because the institution's name should define its membership. What sparked immediate controversy was the phrase he added next. "It's not my music. I don't come from the ghetto. It doesn't speak my language." Simmons questioned why Iron Maiden isn't in the hall when they can sell out stadiums while Grandmaster Flash is, recounted past debates with Ice Cube about rap being a spoken word art, where artists sample and they talk, not even sing, and posed his signature rhetorical question about when Led Zeppelin would get into the Hip-Hop Hall of Fame. Social media exploded within hours, and many people called his comments racist. One person wrote that it was a pretty racist statement to make, while another added that it's exhausting to keep pretending statements like this are acceptable. 4 days passed before Chuck D entered the conversation on February 12th, and the 65-year-old Public Enemy frontman wasn't interested in rage or lengthy explanations because he'd been down this road before with Simmons. What he delivered in an interview with TMZ and in social media posts might be the most elegant counterargument in the entire debate, starting with an acknowledgement that flipped into a breakdown of the hall's actual name. Chuck D wrote that Gene definitely has his opinion, and it carries major weight, but the institution is called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which meant something specific. Not considering rap as rock may hold a debatable point, but rap and some other genres of movement are clearly the role. And that's when he told TMZ the line that went everywhere. Kiss is rock, but they got no roll. The explanation came quick, and what Chuck D meant was that rock and roll split apart in the 1960s when everything else other than rock became the roll. Dance music, soul music, all those different musical parts formed out of the roll section, which meant Simmons was fixating on the rock part with its guitars and live instruments and specific sound while completely forgetting about the roll, which was the rhythm, the movement, the cultural rebellion that gave rock and roll its name in the first place. Rock and roll splintered all over the place in the 1960s, and big banged ever since, Chuck D explained, and in a separate phone interview, he drove home the point about origins. Rock and roll is a derivative of rhythm and blues, so when people try to gatekeep it, they erase its roots, and he wasn't about to let that slide. Elvis learned from black artists, the British invasion studied American blues, and that is history. These two music legends had clashed over this issue before, but their Hall of Fame stories explain why it matters so much to both of them and why the tension runs deep. Public Enemy got inducted in 2013 as part of the class that included Rush, Hart, and Randy Newman, making them the 4th hip-hop act ever inducted after Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Run DMC, and the Beastie Boys. Spike Lee and Harry Belafonte inducted them at the Nokia Theater in Los Angeles on April 18th, and Chuck D later called it better than getting a Grammy because you are winning the respect of your peers. Kiss came a year later in 2014, but their journey to induction took 15 years, even though they became eligible back in 1999. When they finally got in at Brooklyn's Barclays Center on April 10, 2014, with superfan Tom Morello doing the induction honors, drama surrounded everything because the hall only inducted the original lineup of Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss. Current members got excluded, the band refused to perform, and Paul Stanley took shots at the institution during his speech. Stanley told the crowd that the people are speaking to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because they don't want to be spoon-fed by a handful of people, and he made it clear that the people pay for tickets, the people buy albums, but the people who nominate do not. Years later, Stanley admitted the Rock Hall treated them like crap that night, and they even had trouble getting into the venue. The irony cuts deep when you realize Simmons spent 15 years being told his own band didn't belong by the same institution he now uses to judge who deserves entry. March 2016 brought the modern version of this debate into full flame when Simmons told Rolling Stone magazine he was looking forward to the death of rap. April 8th arrived with NWA's induction into the Hall of Fame at Brooklyn's Barclays Center, and the group made absolutely certain Gene Simmons knew they were there and staying. MC Ren addressed Simmons directly during the acceptance speech with a message that hip-hop is here forever, and we're supposed to be here. Ice Cube followed with what became the counter-argument Chuck D would later build on, explaining that rock and roll is not an instrument, and it's not even a style of music, but a spirit that's been going on since the blues, jazz, bebop, soul, rock and roll, R&B, heavy metal, punk rock, and yes, hip-hop. Rock and roll is not conforming to the people who came before you, but creating your own path in music and life, Cube told the audience. Simmons fired back on Twitter the next day, telling Ice Cube that his argument would only make sense when Jimi Hendrix gets into a hip-hop Hall of Fame. Ice Cube's response cut deep with a question about who stole the soul, reminding Simmons that Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Chubby Checker helped invent rock and roll. Hip-hop artists invented something new, Cube pointed out, while rock just reprinted what came before. After the 2026 Backlash hit, Simmons defended his use of the word ghetto to People magazine by saying he stands by his words. The explanation he offered was that ghetto is historically a Jewish term borrowed respectfully by African Americans, and he argued that being racist would be impossible when rock is black music, just a different black music than hip-hop, which is also black music. Rock and roll owes everything to black music, Simmons admitted, calling it a statement of fact and period. That's exactly where Simmons' argument collapses under its own weight, because he acknowledges that rock music has black origins when Chuck Berry is literally dubbed the father of rock and roll. Little Richard, Chubby Checker, Jimi Hendrix, and other black artists didn't just influence rock, they invented it. And Chuck D pointed out that Elvis learned from black artists, while the British invasion studied American blues, which is history that can't be erased. Rock and roll came from black musical traditions. Hip-hop came from black musical traditions. And the line Simmons wants to draw between them starts to look pretty arbitrary once you see it clearly. Authenticity and origins aren't the issue here, because both genres share the same roots, which means it's really about what sound he personally prefers. Chuck D named his favorite musical era as 1964 to 1974, calling it the best collision of musicians, engineers, and experiments, bookended by the Rolling Stones and James Brown. The man sees himself as a fan of it all, citing influences from Jackson Browne to Carole King, alongside his hip-hop peers. And when people tell him rap doesn't belong in the Rock Hall, his response about being the role stops them dead in their tracks because they've never heard that argument before. 7 hip-hop acts had been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by February 2026, including Jay-Z in 2021, Eminem in 2022, and Missy Elliott in 2023. The institution bases inductions on 3 criteria with over 500 voters, including historians and music industry professionals weighing in, and those criteria are influence, innovation, and longevity. Hip-hop's presence becomes undeniable by those standards, and Chuck D put it plainly when he said that hip-hop has influenced fashion, language, and politics, which is bigger than any one instrument. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame itself offered no comment when TMZ reached out about the latest controversy, and maybe their silence says everything that needs saying. This debate will continue because Simmons isn't backing down, and every 3 years or so he'll probably make his case again with the same arguments. Chuck D already won this argument with 5 perfect words though, and the numbers back up why it stings. Kiss sold over 100 million albums worldwide and earned 28 gold records, which was more than any other American rock band in history as of 2014, and their impact on rock music can't be denied by anyone. But if rock and roll is truly a spirit, a rebellion, a cultural force that connects the blues to jazz, to soul, to punk, to hip-hop, then Chuck D nailed exactly what was missing. Kiss is rock, but they got no roll.